So thank you, Moira, for joining me this afternoon and being interviewed for Climbing Lava, my blog. So first of all, tell me a bit about yourself and Chooks as well.
Oh, thanks, Fiona. I appreciate the invitation, and big shout out to Valley who brought us together. She's our matchmaker.
She is.
So I live in, and it's NAIDOC week this week, so I really want to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from Ghana land, and I live in a little village called Willunga in South Australia on the Fleurieu Peninsula, about 50 kilometres south of the city. And Willunga means place of trees in the local Ghana language. So it's a nice little village of people who are fanatics about cycling will know it's one of the Tour Down Under sites that you get to see on the big screens in January. They go up Willunga Hill and nearly just about expire by getting up to the top. So I grew up mostly in South Australia. I've lived here all my life, although I've had a few little stints out of South Australia, but as a child, not as an adult. So when I was little, I lived in New Guinea for a couple of years and in the UK for a couple of years. By the time I was ready to start high school, we were back here in South Australia. So I'm kind of very much a local establishment, and anyone who knows Adelaide knows that 2 degrees of separation is usually about half too many. So we're all connected one way or another, which is, I find that really fabulous. It's not always great for everybody else. But I raised a family here. My kids are all well and truly grown up and left home long ago. One lives here now, but the others, one's in Mexico, one's in Melbourne and one's in Brisbane. And my foster daughter, she's just about to go to live in Broome. So truly scattered like so many families, having their next generation around. And I have one grandchild, and he turned 4 last week. So that's one of the joys of getting older, being able to see the next generation explore and find out what the future holds. So I've spent most of my life doing change making. I professionally as a social worker, and social work is all about systems change, either changing the system to help the person fit in or changing the person to help the system fit around one way or another. But I've mainly worked at that systems level in policy and planning. Essentially, I've always say I've worked from the kitchen table to the cabinet table. So I've been a chief of staff for a minister in government. I've been CEO for a number of small, medium-sized not-for-profits, including Volunteering South Australia and Northern Territory. Currently sit on a board. I'm board director of a international project management and education organisation called Scope Global. It's based here in Adelaide, and we've got people all over the world. And a few years ago, I was getting concerned about the gap of investment for women. I've always had a very strong gender approach to life and applying a gender lens in all sorts of ways, and doing some analysis around what the patriarchy is, all keeping people back, and that sort of analysis. And my husband was unwell at the time, and in fact was dying, and I was sitting on the couch quite a lot. Started to look at what some of those things again that I hadn't looked at for a long time, and became astonished, horrified, and then activated to see what we could do to shift the gender investment gap. So, for example, venture capital, which is often a way for startups to get funding, less than 4% of that goes to female founders. It's 200 years if we're waiting for the gender pay gap to close. So I don't even want to do the calculations on the gender investment gap. And there's quite a difference in the way funding happens and investment and capital, working capital is raised for startups and for social enterprises. So a lot of social enterprises grow out of the not-for-profit sector, which has been very heavily dependent on government grants and philanthropics. And startups seems to be, from more high risk takers in venture capital. And in fact, there's a lot of similarities in how those investments get made, if you like, and women get treated quite differently in both of those systems. And so I thought, oh, well, that looks like that's something that will interest me. And I thought there'd be like 10 other people who might be interested in it. I started a little Facebook group, a closed group, because I thought nobody else would be interested. There's now 2,500 people involved in that. And we grow 10, 20 people a week. I just continually can't keep up. And that's called Chooks SA. And predominantly it's women, about 4% are men, and it's nearly all South Australia.
No, so I heard about Chooks SA from Valley. We're actually having a CEO catch up when she mentioned Chooks, and it sounded fantastic. So I straight away joined your newsletter and Facebook group. And as keeps happening to me this year, I found an amazing community of people who are doing fantastic things and supporting each other. So what's the main goal of Chooks?
Well, Chooks is really, so as a Facebook community, it's really just a place where people can get support, get information. So I really try and give a lot of information from all around the world, as well as just helping raise consciousness about what the issues are. But as it's grown, people are connecting with each other, collaborating with one another, finding new customers, finding ways to join together. It's quite phenomenal. Every day I go, oh my goodness, I don't look at it for 2 hours and get a shock. So it really was designed from my point of view, and the way I curate it is to build community and build connection, and to continue to keep a gender lens over whatever it is we're seeing and doing, so that it drives the agenda forward, which is to close the gender investment gap.
Okay. And what about the co-op that you've got going as well?
Oh, so exciting.
It is.
So, thank you for asking. So, Chooks SA is a closed Facebook community and a bit of an online, and it'll always be free, and it will always be there for community purposes. So, it's it is your village green, if you like. Yeah. However, every village needs a few shops as well to help the economy go around. And so we've established what we're calling the hen house co-op. And the hen house, people will join the co-op and they'll become members of it. And that way they can become more active in actually some of the processes and things we want to change. So in the co-op itself, you pay an annual membership fee, and then you buy a share, which will be $1. So we're still waiting for the very last piece of the puzzle to come in from the Department of Co-op Registrations, which our state government authorities taken my money, given me the name, and still haven't given me the certificate. So any minute now it'll arrive.
All right. Any day.
And I can't wait. And then we can officially say we are the Hen House Co-op Limited. And when we say that, people will be able to pay their annual fee, get their $1 subscription share, and then they'll participate. Every co-ops always have activity tests. You have to do one thing. So if you're a farmer, for example, your one thing might be that you'll sell your grain to the co-op, or if you're a lawn mowing franchise, that you'll mow each other's lawn once a year or something. So in our co-op, the Hen House, the activity test is that you will do one thing a year to help close the gender investment gap, and you'll make that public. And so that thing could be, it might be a grandma who decides she's going to give equal amounts of Christmas holiday money to her grandchildren, boys and girls, equal amount. It might be that you're the head of Telstra and you want to make sure that you bring a gender lens and train everyone from unconscious bias in selection. It might be that you are a regular goer to your local newsagent and you really don't like seeing all the business magazines under the men's magazine section, for example. They are some examples. So you will publicly say, that's the one thing I'm going to do, and we'll bring all of you together once a year to give you some advice about how to turn the curve on the things that you've already nominated. So that will give us an opportunity to do some education and some practical campaigning around those things. And that program is called Give a Cluck.
Love it. I love the names.
Then there's the Incubator program, which is being funded by philanthropy. And that's a so it's a co-op incubator. So we're bringing women who are, for whatever reason, disadvantaged. So they may be women survivors of domestic violence, exiting prison. They might have English not as their first language. They might be women who live in the regions, who are coming together in groups of 5 or more, because 5 is the minimum number for a co-op, to incubate their business and create a business out of it. So a lot of the business incubators, so Muradi, for example, what Julie runs in SheEI, in Telstra, you know, has a different focus for different sorts of women. We've got lots of incubators where people pay, you know, $10,000 a month for 6 months to start their business. So this doesn't cost the women who participate anything. That we're raising funds for that so they can participate. So we're really hoping we're not only just filling a gap in the incubator market, but we're actually filling a gap in the business market as well, and obviously changing the lives of those women who are stepping up. So we're in our pilot for that at the moment.
Yep.
And we call the groups that are coming, you'll love this, we call them clutches. And that's 2 a play on words. One is that, you know, that's what a little group of little chicks are called, but also the clutch idea of changing gear and, you know, needing to put your foot on the clutch to move things. So we've got, we're into week 4 of the incubator. The incubator is a 100-hour program, 10 hours a week for 10 weeks that people have to contribute to. It's not face-to-face. Some of it is face-to-face, but predominantly it's online, and you know, we coach over Zoom and all that kind of thing. And there's 3 coaches in that program, and I'm one of them. So that's coming together, mainly been you know, bootstrapped and underwritten by all my other paid work to make that happen. But we do have some philanthropic funds to kick that off, and we're beginning to build our digital platform around that as well. So people from Chooks, for example, will start to be able to start volunteering to be mentors in that program as those businesses start to. And so that will be a piece of the mentor matching. We'll also begin an online shop so that those people who have come through the incubator program have an external facing purchasing platform. And if you're in the co-op itself, if you're a member of the Hen House, we'll also be listing your businesses so that people can say, you know, this is a female first business and that's what you want to invest in it. And then the 3rd program under the Hen House will be called Hatched, and that is for those little those businesses that have come through the incubator program that now want a bit more support. They're ready to run their own business but need a bit more infrastructure and support around them, because quite often a lot of the incubator programs, once they're over, you know, then that's it, everyone waves goodbye and you're on your own.
Yep. And
we don't want that to happen. We want them to be successful. We are considering possibly enabling other businesses to come in at Hatched, but they will be co-ops. Like, we're going to be very neutral and completely agnostic, actually, about what businesses women run.
Yep.
But we are not agnostic about the kind of business model, but the governance structure. So the governance will always be a co-op.
Okay. Yep.
So we're really wanting to foster that economic model, and we believe that it's very female friendly. It's got all the things that we believe are important in it. It's a distribution and equality and equity in the share.
Yeah.
And also co-ops were the first places that women could vote and participate in. So under British law, as it was in those days, women couldn't vote, but they could vote in co-ops when they first started. So when Roshda's team sent them up originally. So they've got a really strong history in women's economic empowerment, and have fallen by the wayside for that purpose over the years. There's still lots and lots of co-ops out there.
Yeah.
But the feminine energy and as an actual economic model to support women has kind of fallen away. So in South Australia, the biggest female founded co-op was the Hairdressers Co-op, and it went really well for 100 years. And then gradually, as the business, as the industry changed, that started to change as well. And they set it up originally as like a buyer's co-op, so that they could get the like group purchasing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I knew about some of those things under Chooks, but I didn't know all of them. So thank you for that, Moira. That's really awesome. So next thing to ask you about was the fact that you're a member of the Order of Australia.
So now I even put my little badge on it. I can't hardly see it.
Awesome. I can
I
can. Yes.
I've got lots of big badges as well, but that's the small one.
So tell me a bit about that. How did that come about and how does it feel?
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's well, apparently, apparently I have friends. And apparently,
What a thought.
some of them decided to write a little letter to Government House for me, the Governor General. So I received it in January. It was in the this year's Australia Day Honours.
Yeah.
And I got a call in October last year from the Governor General's office. I thought it was a joke, and a very, very serious young man was talking to hello, and I was thinking, whose voice? Like in my head, I was thinking, whose voice is that? That's not a voice I know. And I'm going, oh yeah, right, And I said, tell me your name, like what's your name and where you're from again. And he obviously detected that I didn't think it was real. And he said, would you like me to give you the number and you can ring back? And I thought, oh God, no, this must be serious then. They wouldn't say that. Okay. And so he rang just to ask if to tell me I'd been nominated. If I was went through the process, would I be willing to receive the award? I said, oh yeah, sure, no worries, whatever. Of course.
Why not?
I better honour those people that put all the work in to make that happen. So it was more out of, I thought, oh my gosh, I wonder who's done that. You know, and you're sworn to secrecy. And then in the beginning of December, I got another call saying that I had been accepted and it would happen, and to expect media and, you know, and all of that. And, you know, and don't tell anybody. So I didn't tell a soul. I was kept it to myself because I still didn't quite believe it, you know. I thought it was probably true, but, you know, nothing like seeing things in writing to know it's true. And then there was going to be a public announcement at 10 o'clock on the eve of Australia Day. And at about, I don't know, 5 seconds past 10 o'clock, my phone started beeping. I get Facebook messages were going. I was actually in bed reading a book, and I thought, oh my God, it's tonight. Like, it wasn't that I'd forgotten. I was still very conscious of it, but it wasn't like, oh my God, it's really here now. And I thought, oh, right, okay. Oh, I haven't told my mum, and I haven't told my brother, and I haven't told my kids. And I thought, oh, what am I going to do? It's a bit late. Like, so I texted all the kids and sent them messages. And my brother, it was Phil Collins' concert was on in Adelaide. So I texted him saying, hope you're enjoying Phil, having a great night. Lots of love, Moira Were AM. And he said to his wife, Am? What's Am? Like, what's she talking about? And so Kathy, who's very sensible, worked it out immediately. And texted me back and said, are you in the Australia Honours? I go, yep, that's what happened. So then I thought, well, Mum could sleep. I'll ring her early in the morning. So, because I didn't want them to read it in the paper first.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I rang her. She hadn't seen it, thank goodness. Or she told me she hasn't. And I don't know if she did, but she told me. So that's what happened. So it was all very lovely. And then I thought, who would have done this? Like, this is a lot of work. Anyway, I just thought about it, and I thought, oh yeah, I bet I know who started this. So I contacted her and I said, was that you? She said, yes, that was me. And she's got a lot of time and resources, so I knew that, because it takes a lot. And then all these people came out of the woodwork going, oh, I did a reference for you 2 years ago.
Oh.
And it was actually 2 years from the time it got put in to the time it was approved.
Wow.
So that was all before Chooks. So it had nothing to do with the Chook stuff. It all had to do with my community service over, 40 years in primarily in the community sector and volunteering. So, you know, being on boards and committees in the church and domestic violence, and in my international work, I'd worked with a lot of community organisations there as well. So it was a reflection, I guess, of you know, what I had done in my voluntary capacity. But also there was recognition of leadership and in that as well.
Yeah.
And I've got a really good friend, and I said to her, this just feels really weird, you know, like. She said, no, it's the community giving you a big hug back. And I just
lovely.
thought that was so beautiful. And since then, I felt like, because I wasn't wearing the medals or anything, and I said, I've got to get practice at it. So I'm having practice at wearing it now. So.
I think you should. I think it's awesome. I love that concept that it's a hug back from the community. That's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So, Moira, I was going to ask you, actually, I'm going to go off my own script now, because as you said that, I remembered something else I wanted to ask you about. One of the things that Valley talked to me about when she introduced Chooks and you to me was about your work with where our super gets invested. I'd love to hear more about that, if that's something you're able to talk about.
Sure. So I sit on the Social Impact Investment Network for South Australia.
Yep.
And after my husband died, he left a lot of debts that I didn't know he had accumulated. So that really put a very big surprise in my life. I thought, I've really got to get a lot more control over my own set of circumstances. And in CINSA, we were looking at strategies generally about how we can improve the climate and conversation around social impact investment. And so just totally on my own, I went off, found, you know, I don't know, what do they call, like a wealth management person, and sat down with them and looked at my own portfolio, because I gathered up all the bits like typically women, you know, we've got super in 500 places. So I put it all together, and I said that what I wanted to do was actually just look at what where the investments are in my super, and run a gender lens over it. So what I did, that's what I did. So then they got all the portfolio back for me and had it all beautifully done. And I literally went through one by one each of the businesses and in the companies. And if they didn't have any women on the board, I said, no, I don't want them. I don't want to invest in them. And if they didn't have some policies around gender, I wasn't interested in it. And I did all that research myself, just literally went through it night after night. I just chose one, and I just did, like, you know, just doing the knitting 3 stitches at a time. And then I went back to them and said, okay, this is what I've done, and this is what I think you need to do now on, essentially. And they said, oh, that's really interesting. You're not the only person who's doing this. And we're getting a lot of people, particularly women, who are coming to us and saying, you know, we want to invest in renewables. We want to, you know, that we're bringing different lenses to our life. And you'll know from the CEO work, Fiona, that, you know, the largest transfer of wealth in history we're on the precipice of, because women live longer than men. Mm-hmm. And so we will be in a position where we'll be inheriting some considerable sums, and we can use that in a really positive way and hopefully address some of these problems. So I then took that idea to CINSA and said, oh, this is what I've been doing in my spare time, by the way, this little idea I got. And we then have been socialising that around town and getting people's interest up about it. And I'm just encouraging people, because most of us don't even know where our super goes. And we get our annual report and we just put it in the, you know, in the bin, and we think, oh, that looks good, it was up 1%, or, you know, oh, that was a bad year. But it is something we can have some control over. And I think, you know, improving literacy around those things is important. And it's something that I've done often. So when I was CEO of Volunteering SA, you know, we did have some money in like a foundation long-term investments. I did some work around that then, making sure it was going to the right places, because a lot of ethical investment isn't really that ethical. It's so you've really got to do some homework around it.
Yep.
Years and years ago, I did a piece of work for the Women's Information Switchboard, which was part of our women's services in state government here. They were my clients, and they were concerned that a lot of women were turning up, you know, on it was a telephone support service, and discovering that as they were about to leave because of domestic violence, that they had nothing. Like they weren't even co-signatures. This is like 30 years ago on check accounts. If that's how long ago people had check accounts, and you know, they didn't have access to anything. And so I did a project with them at the time called More Than Pin Money. So like it was when pins were first coming in, you know, the code.
Yep.
And getting people to just have their own money. And so it was a terrible shock to me to realise that I'd missed some of that myself as well. And I'm smart and capable, and, you know, so it can happen to anyone. And the idea of sexually transmitted debt is a real thing, particularly for women who are in DV situations, or for whatever reasons are home caring for someone for long periods of time, whether they're mum out of the workforce. And become dependent on others. And we really need to do better about that. So that's kind of all intertwined to the way I see the world, that our economic independence is probably our greatest way of being able to shape the kind of world we want to live in. So if we've got some control over whatever that is useful.
Yeah, I actually interviewed someone for my blog maybe a month or two ago who is very passionate about women having more control over their finances. And exactly what you said then is that where the money goes is what actually gets bigger, you know. So the more we have a say in where the money goes, the more those industries and those areas will grow. So that's, really important, and not something I'd been aware of for way too long.
Yeah, and we're good at things like fair trade and all of that, so we just have to just keep adding our thinking to it. And as consumers, even if we don't have very much money, we can make some pretty big decisions about where we spend.
Yeah, and nearly all of us have got super, so we can make decisions about that. I think that's awesome. So Moira, at this stage, I'm going to ask you about a time when you have stepped out of your comfort zone. I'm guessing probably happens fairly often.
I'm fairly fearless. Like I don't, but I'm terrified, if that makes sense at the same time. So
it does actually. I can totally relate to that.
That old adage, you know, fear the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah.
So that's certainly true for me. And when I was chief of staff working in politics, I mean, that was just terrifying and out of my comfort zone every single day. Wasn't in politics at the time, this was after it, but going to this estate dinner where some Duke and Duchess were going, and I, you know, had the high heels on, they're about this high, which was about that much higher than I normally wear. And I was terrified. Like I was that night I was really out of my comfort zone. And one of my boys came with me. He was my date for the night. And the two of us were in hysterics because it was like, you know, he was going, I've never seen you so dressed up. And I'm going, I've never been this dressed up. This feels so uncomfortable. I don't like this. And so you know, they're the kind of things you can be surprised about how uncomfortable, you know. I can get up and talk in front of 500 people and wouldn't bat an eyelid. But the thought of wearing high heels in front of, you know, a room full of people at a big fancy dinner, that's very uncomfortable for me. And I think too, when I, you know, in a political context, when you're having to deal with a lot of risk because, you know, you can bring a government down by making a mistake. When you're a minority government, which was the case when I was a chief of staff, it's really, you know, you're on edge all the time and constantly thinking, is this going to work, or am I going to cause the fall of the government? That can be quite scary.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think that on the whole, you know, what is a comfort zone is really about also how do you manage yourself in unusual or confusing or anxiety-provoking situations. And I tend to, I think if I notice I'm really anxious, then I'll just think, I'm really anxious, it's time to take a few breaths. And I, you know, it's that old idea of, you know, do you push yourself forward through the pain barrier, or do you just give yourself a break and don't do it? And I think as I've got older, I'm less likely to push myself through pain barriers. I think, well, I actually don't have to do that, and I'll push others. But I'll also take risks that I know that no one else in the room can take. I'll often put myself in that situation, and certainly having that AM is a really great way of doing that, because particularly with younger ones, like I can say and do things that it would be just too dangerous literally for them to do, but no one's going to get mad at me. And little old lady with grey hair kind of thing I can use quite effectively. I had a hilarious night the other night at an event that I felt very uncomfortable, definitely outside of my comfort zone. It was a intimate dinner for about 20 people. There were 3 women, all the rest were men, 4 women, only me. And it was for like angel investors and funders and all that kind of thing. And this, the $100 million man who'd exited was sitting next to me, and he was the guest speaker. And he wasn't stopping talking. He just talked and talked and talked and talked. And but before that all started, we were all asked to introduce ourselves according to, say our name and what was the business that we were disrupting, because these are all the cool dudes, startup dudes.
Yep.
And when it got to my turn, I go, hello, my name's Moira, and I'm disrupting patriarchy.
Love it.
It was hilarious. It was like, okay, right.
Next.
Now, none of the 3 younger women in that room could have got away with that. So I take that I've got a responsibility, in fact, to do that. So I now think about discomfort as how can I make someone else uncomfortable? So I made all the guys feel uncomfortable. Anyway, when the speaker finished going on and on, and telling the whole story about, how he'd made his money, lost his money, made his money, lost his money, found the wife, got rid of the wife, found the, it was just a classic story. And I'm kind of, okay, I know what's going to happen next. And then he saw the light, he had his Damascus moment, and it's all about purpose now, right? All that. And lovely guy. And I just tapped him on the shoulder in the middle of him sort of having his moment of seeing the light. And I said, I've only got one thing to say to you. He goes, oh, yeah, what's that? And I said, welcome.
Welcome to the real world.
We've all been doing that forever. And I made this big speech about white privilege men, and which wasn't a big speech, but it was impactful, 3 minutes of talking. And I just thought they had gone to that event in their comfort zone. It was all familiar. They were going to all be with their mates. They were all going to be supporting each other. They're all going to be talking about and honouring the hero. And it was all about the quest and who was going to be on the journey with them and blah, blah, blah. We're dealing with, the Star Wars soundtrack was somewhere in the background, all of that. And I just thought, actually, no, I can disrupt this just as, I'm the one that came into the room really uncomfortable, but there was a lot of squirming going on when I was talking. And some of the guys were fabulous afterwards. They go, thank you, like we feel the same. But they couldn't say that. If they'd said that, they would have looked like really pathetic in front of their hero. So it frees everybody up sometimes. And that's one of the things I'm learning about comfort and discomfort, that sometimes I can, if I'm uncomfortable, chances are everyone else is as well. And maybe I can turn up the discomfort factor on a few people too.
I think that's an awesome take on being out of your comfort zone. I love that, because how else do you disrupt the patriarchy if you don't make the patriarchy uncomfortable?
I agree.
Yeah.
Probably won't get invited back. I did say to the organiser, you could have me as your speaker next time.
I hope they do.
He was hilarious. He was really fabulous. Absolutely fantastic, the guy who'd organised it. He invited me out for a drink afterwards to debrief, I think. So I think made him buy me a hot chocolate. Quite risky on the rocks, so anyway. He was terrific, though. I really respect him a lot.
Awesome.
It's lovely.
Yeah, that is Yeah, that's one of the best takes of just stepping out of your comfort zone that I've talked to someone about, Moira. That's really good. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the readers of my blog at this point?
Well, just that, keep up the good work, I think, don't underestimate the little influences that you can have on the tiniest things every day. When you're noticing things around you, don't keep that noticing to yourself. If you see someone who needs a bit of encouragement, say it and open the door for people. If you have a relationship or a link or something for someone else, it's really always appreciated. People don't always know how to say thank you, but it is appreciated.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Moira, for spending time with us this evening. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I can tell Sharon has as well. And I think the people who watch this afterwards will also enjoy it. So thank you. I'm going to stop recording now.